All right, hi everybody, John Meadows here, and today I wanted to talk about should you bulk or should you cut or can you do both at the same time? It's a question that comes up all the time now, and I think it's a great question. It's interesting because back when I started in the 80s and 90s, you never heard the terms clean bulk, dirty bulk, like those terms didn't even exist. There was only one way to do things. You bulked up and then you got cut. Like there was no other way to do it. And the way that you bulked up, it didn't really matter. You just ate as much as you could possibly eat. It's a method that I call the power shove method. You just shove down calories until you couldn't eat anymore. In fact, I remember when I was training growing up at World Gym over there, it was right across the street from Orion's buffet. So we would train really hard. Then we would walk across the street. We'd go to the buffet and we could eat till we couldn't stand it anymore. I mean, we would eat a lot. And that was just the way we did things. Now, the interesting thing is, so some people, they eat nonstop, but they really don't gain any weight. You know, those people just have fast metabolisms. I was one of those people. So I could say I was dirty bulking, but the reality was I was getting all the calories in I could, and I still couldn't gain any weight. So I don't even really call that dirty bulking. You're not even in a caloric surplus. And I remember eating peanut butter, honey, and banana sandwiches was my go-to for gaining weight. And I remember drinking the gallon of whole milk every day. I did all that stuff, but it wasn't until I got deeper into my 20s that I really started gaining weight. So you couldn't even really call that a dirty bulk because even then it still wasn't enough calories to even grow. But anyways, I'm kind of getting off sidetrack here. And somewhere around about 2001, I think is where this stuff started making more sense to me. So in 2000, I competed in the Mr. USA out in Las Vegas, and I got eighth place. And I was pretty happy with how I looked. So I came back the next year in 2001. So the off season in 2000, I had got up to about 240 pounds and really liked the way I looked when I got to the show, which was I was around 212 pounds, if I remember right, 211, 212. And then in 2001, I bulked up to 260. And in order to get to 260, I had to eat nonstop. I mean, I remember I had a corporate job at the time. I remember my desk drawer had boxes of Pop-Tarts. It had pork rinds. I mean, everything you can think of. And I ate nonstop. I got up to 260, and I want to try to find a picture so you can see how fat my head was. I had this gigantic Charlie Brown head. And those of you who don't know me from the old days, everybody thinks, oh, you've always been cut. No, I got really fat. So anyways, I got to 260, and then I had to diet down really hard because I had gained a lot of fat. I was wearing 40-inch waist pants, and I had just gained a lot of fat. So I had to go much lower in calories, much lower in carbs. I had to do more cardio. And what happened was I got down to I ended up weighing about the same that I did the year before, but I actually looked worse. So I had to diet so hard, my body just had kind of this tired out look to it. It didn't look good. And I ended up paying the price, and I think I got like 13th place. I got my butt kicked. And then the next year, I said to myself, going from 240 to 260 did me no good. It did me no good. So the next year, I only got up to 235 or 240. And when I came back down, I thought I looked really good again. I placed in a really tough nationals. It was a very, very tough competition. I was in the second call out at that show back in Dallas, Texas. And I never really did that bulking up again. And I continued through the years to increase my body weight, particularly in 2011, 2012, when I think you guys have heard the story. My competition weight shot up into 220s. And my off-season weight was only like 230, 232. So I began to kind of see some things, and maybe that old style of bulking and cutting probably wasn't the best. And through the years, I've obviously worked with a lot of people, and what I come to realize is I think there's this ideal state that you're in to grow the fastest. And I think for most guys, it's probably somewhere between 8% body fat on the low end to maybe 12 or 13%, maybe 15%, but probably more like 12 or 13%. I think when you're in that range, body fat, I think that's when people kind of gain muscle the fastest. And their nutrient partitioning seems to be better. I've talked about insulin sensitivity and things like that in other videos, your ability for your muscles to kind of suck in nutrition, amino acids and carbs and so forth. And if you start getting like really that 15, 20% body fat, if you start getting that really high, your insulin sensitivity gets worse, your body gets some inflammation, and those things do have an impact on your ability to gain muscle. So, and I think for a woman, it's probably somewhere around 15 to 20% would be what I would observe in terms of this ideal state. So that's what I like to see. I like to see people in that ideal state, and then they can get into a little bit of a caloric surplus and you can continue to try to gain muscle. Now, if you're in that state, the cool thing is you can still gain a little bit of fat and you're okay to a certain point, and then you also aren't really fat. So you don't have to go through this period where you're really fat. So it means when you get to the higher fat, you can actually, like, let's say you get up to 17% body fat, boom, it's time to do a little mini cut. And then you don't have to diet as long. So that might've been a little unclear. So I like for people to get into this 8 to 12% body fat range for males, maybe 15 to 20% for females. If you can get into this caloric surplus and you can continue to try to gain muscle and try to gain weight. And then when your fat starts getting out of that range, like say 15, 16% for guys, then it's time to bring it back down into the range. And it shouldn't take too long. So hopefully that makes a little more sense. And then if you're under that range, let's say you're 5% body fat, then you're obviously you don't want to be super lean either, because hormonally, it's just not real good for your endocrine system to be that lean all the time. And then also your joint integrity, if you're that lean, sometimes you're at risk for injuries just due to your joints. So try to get into this performance, this ideal state of body fat, and get into a little bit of a surplus. Now, how big of a surplus? Well, here's the thing that people miss. Muscle can only grow so fast. So let's say your maintenance level is at 3,000 calories. That's what it takes to just keep you normal. Let's say you bump it up to 3,500 calories and you're growing. Let's say you bump up to 4,000 calories and you're still growing. Does that mean 4,500 calories you're still going to grow as much muscle as fast? No, you may not grow any more muscle because you can only grow so fast. Facts, we call it. Those are facts. You can only grow so fast. Or else we could all just eat 10,000 calories and be massive. But that's not how the body works. You can only accumulate muscle tissue so fast. So eating beyond that makes no sense at all because all you're going to do is gain fat. So let's say the person at 3,000 calories goes up to 3,500 and they're gaining muscle and maybe a little bit of fat. So if they go to 4,000 calories, maybe they'll gain no muscle and it'll be all fat. So where that caloric surplus is varies, but I can tell you this, if you think that it's just a matter of going to 5,000, 7,000, 9,000 calories, I think it's a really bad idea because you can only gain so much so fast with muscle. Guess what has virtually no limit though? In gaining fat. So if you want to just gain a ton of fat, then yeah, just go to 10,000 calories, eat as much as you want. Now, we all have that friend that eats 7,000 calories and stays lean. There's always these examples, but they're not really in a surplus. It sounds like a lot of food, but for them, it's normal. So really, it just comes down to what's normal for you. Then maybe it's a 500 calorie surplus. Now, here's the other thing. You can gain a lot more muscle a lot more quickly when you're kind of newer to training. So a 500 calories, maybe a 700 calorie surplus for someone who's pretty new to lifting might work perfect for them. But you get someone who's real advanced, and then the 700 calories, they can only grow so fast. And as you advance up in a scale in terms of how close you are to your genetic potential, now it's even harder to gain muscle. So now that number that was 500 calories, it might be 300, right? So there's a couple factors in play. It's how experienced are you in training? How close are you to your genetic potential? Because the higher you are, then the less likely you are to gain more muscle. So hopefully that makes sense. And that would tell you that these guys that are, these bodybuilders that, are very advanced, for them to get into a 2,000 calorie surplus is not a good idea. You can only gain weight so fast. And then that's even harder as you get closer to your genetic potential. So Some other considerations. So how long? So okay. So let me back up a little bit. So then you get up. You're in that. Say you're a guy and you get up into that 16, 17% body fat range. You remember, I said I want to get you in that ideal state. So now, how do you get back down to the ideal state? So now you do a little mini cut. Now this should be easy because you're not 25%. You kind of kept everything in check. You grew as fast as you could grow, but you didn't eat so much that you just got fat unnecessarily, right? So now, how do you get down back into that? Well, obviously you go into a caloric deficit. It's not rocket science. I think everybody listening to this probably knows that. The question becomes, how do you get back into the deficit? Do you get really aggressive with your caloric restriction? Do you cut your calories 25%, 35%? Well, I would tell you that that's too aggressive. And the reason why is because the higher that deficit becomes, the more likely you are to lose muscle. And you don't want to lose muscle. It's simply too hard to build. So I would say more like a 10 to 15% reduction in calories should be what you're targeting until you get back down to that ideal state, and then you can bring your calories back up. So now if you've done that, getting back down in that state, it may take 2 weeks, maybe 3, maybe 4, but it's not bad. Like anyone who's dieted can handle 3 or 4 weeks. What's hard is like 10 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks. That's when it becomes really, really difficult. So the thing I want you to take away from this video is I want you to be in that ideal state. If you're above it, I want you to get down into it. If you're below it, I want you to get up into it. And then once you're into it, you can do your 200, 300, 400, 500 calorie surplus. I think if you're newer to weightlifting, a 500 calorie surplus is good. I think if you're more advanced, I think maybe a 300 or 400 calorie surplus is probably good. And then probably half that for women. Now, there are certain exceptions. You're going to have, oh, well, I know Lee Priest did this. He got really fat and he was successful. There's always people outside of the normal range, and there's a lot of factors involved. You may have somebody who's, for example, who's taken a break and they're coming back, like Kevin LeBron, for example. Kevin was famous for not training in the off season and then all of a sudden gaining a ton of muscle leading up to a show. Well, Kevin is regaining muscle he already had. There's a big difference between muscle you already have versus building new muscle. There's a huge difference, all right? I could quit training for 3 or 4 months and lose a lot of muscle, and I could probably get it all back in a month. And then I could put up some pictures about, look how I gained 20 pounds of muscle. No, that's very, very misleading. So you can't use like a Kevin LeBron, for example. You can't use like a Lee Priest. And these extreme examples, you just got to be really careful with those examples. And then obviously, I don't really want to get into it, but you have the chemical aspect too. People take a lot of different chemicals and things like that, which skews all the numbers as well. But most of you aren't in that boat. So anyways, I hope that helps. Hope that helps shed light on what you should do. And again, it depends kind of what your state is. And, are you 20% body fat? Are you 12? Are you 5? Because my answer is going to depend on those things before I say you should do this or this or this. So anyways, short video today. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next time.